So welcome everyone. So this evening we are going to have a bit of a debate, a discussion on the existence of God, topics related to that. So I will be questioning Shivarama. Do I have someone who can keep the time, just so we can be conscious of how we're doing? Maybe you showed it? Okay. So we'll speak for maybe 40-45 minutes, discussing various topics. And then we also want to open out for questions from the audience. We're requesting also that when there are questions from the audience, that you think very carefully to make sure the questions are clear and concise, so everyone can understand the question, so Marge has the opportunity to answer the question, and so that we can also stay focused. And we would also, with the questions, if we can give them more of a general flavor, as opposed to going to lots of specific, details of the scriptures like that. So general kinds of arguments especially, because otherwise we could get sidetracked. So I'm going to begin by addressing Shivarama on one or two areas that confuse me around this whole idea of a belief in God. I would like to just share with you something I was reflecting on.
You're in the role of
I'm in the role.
Atheist.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
So Marge, I was reflecting recently on someone that I knew, someone that I'd actually read about, and it's an 85-year-old lady, very wonderful pillar of the community, spent much of her life doing charity work, etc. So one evening she's walking home and some thugs attack her. She's knocked unconscious, she's in hospital. It was in the news, obviously many people were shocked. Now, what was really shocking according to the news report is not what happened to her only, that was shocking enough. But according to the news report, there were passers-by who saw what was happening and they did nothing. I mean, I'd just like to first of all ask you, how do you feel about that? Would you also think that that's a very kind of unfortunate way of behaving?
Of ignoring someone's suffering?
Suffering,
yes,
yeah.
of course.
Yeah, okay. So, just as an aside, according to your religion, according to your belief, do you believe that God is all-powerful?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And according to your religion, according to your belief, do you also believe that God is all-knowing?
Mm-hmm.
So, we have here a situation, so let's say, so it's shocking that this woman's being attacked.
You're just asking why good things or bad things happen to good people.
Can I just finish? I was going to say, is that okay?
Trying to save you time.
Yeah?
Go
So,
ahead.
you have a situation where a very frail old lady is being attacked. There are people walking by who can see what's going on. They do nothing. In a similar vein, according to your belief, you have an all-knowing God who's completely aware of this type of suffering that goes on. That same God, according to your own statement, is all-powerful.
Mm-hmm.
That means he's completely capable of intervening,
Yes,
and yet he does absolutely nothing.
that's right.
Is that the kind of God that you believe in?
That's right.
You see no problem with that?
No, I don't see any problem with it at all. If you see the greater picture, this is loud enough, you can hear? If you see the greater picture, no, then there's not a problem. If you see part of the picture, which you're describing, is here's an old lady who is getting a certain type of very violent treatment. But what if you saw the whole picture? What if you saw that lady, you don't know, say that lady had earlier on tortured some girls. Say, hypothetically. And that she deserves some type of punishment, which legally she didn't get, but by the laws of nature she's supposed to get. Would you see the picture differently then?
Okay, so
would you?
if
In other words,
hypothetically it's true,
if the old lady was not just a real carte blanche do-gooder, but that she was actually did some bad things, say in this life, forget about another life, that you don't know about, and maybe other people didn't know about, then did you think, of course, for us, that also connects with the law of karma, that there's an action, and for every action, that there's a reaction. So then would you consider that it isn't that God is just all-knowing and he's ignorant, or he actually doesn't care about the suffering of others, but actually that he's a judge who delivers actually punishment to people for the activities that they perform. Just like, for instance, a judge. Do you think judges are bad people when they tell people to get hanged?
We don't do that in this country.
That's unfortunate.
That's a matter of opinion.
Yeah. All right, but in some countries they do, but they give them life imprisonment.
Okay.
Do you think that they're bad people because they put them in jail for life?
It depends if the judgment is fair.
That's right. And if the judgment is fair, because that person, who you may think is a very nice father, he was very good, and all he did was actually he just stole something from somebody in order to maintain his family, not knowing whatever happened in the past, then is the judge bad or is he good?
If it's the case that the judgment is fair, the judge is good.
So, God is the best judge, so therefore what he does is definitely good. Whether you see the perspective or not, that's your problem. It's not his problem.
That's
The
a
problem
big
is
if.
that you don't see, no, it's not a big if. You don't see the whole picture.
And you do?
Huh? God does. We're not talking about me. I didn't make the judgment. He made the judgment. But I know that God sees the picture because he sees the picture of what happened to this old lady in her previous life and lives beside that. You don't know.
But then,
I don't know.
exactly. But then this is the point. You see, your whole argument rests on ifs. If it's true that that old lady had some previous life, some previous activity, some previous bad activity that she did, if it's true, then you may have an argument. But what if it's not true? What if that old lady is completely innocent? What if there is no such thing as this hypothetical past
Then
life?
you
Let
have
me
to
just
have an
finish.
answer as
Then
to
let me
why
just
things
finish.
happen.
Can I just finish the point?
Then you have to
Can I
have
just
an
finish the
answer as
point?
to why things
Can I
happen.
finish the point,
Finish
please?
your point.
Okay. If it is the case that you're wrong, if your hypothetical previous lives, previous bad activities, if they are not real, then actually, isn't it the case that you're worshipping a God who willingly allows his own creation to suffer and maybe fobs off a few people with some mythological excuse about
You mean you're
reincarnation?
accepting that God exists now?
I didn't say that.
Well, you're blaming him that he's allowing things to happen.
I'll take it to the conclusion. My conclusion would be that actually, based upon that, there is such a contradiction in your religious definition of God. There's such a contradiction in the God being all-knowing, all-powerful, and all good.
And all just.
And all good and all
And all
just.
just.
It would be such a contradiction that the overwhelming probability would be that such a being simply does not exist. Isn't that the truth, Shivram?
No. Because first you need to tell me, why is it happening? You got an answer?
Excuse me?
Why is that lady, why is this happening to the old lady?
I don't know. I said this.
That- well, you
no,
don't
no, no,
know.
no, no. Hold on.
Why is it
I
happening?
did say
Give
that
me
she
a
was
better
attacked.
answer. If you
I
don't
did
like
say
my answer,
she was attacked by thugs.
Give me a better answer why she's attacked by thugs and not someone else is attacked by thugs. What's your answer? Did it just happen by chance?
Yes.
It did just happen
Yes.
by chance. Is that an answer?
Yes.
What does chance mean? What are the chances that this should happen to her and
And
not
what
to
do you want me to do?
someone
Get a
else?
dictionary? Everyone knows what chance means. Chance means that there's a random event that happened. Well, what's the problem
No,
with that
chance
definition?
means that there's a probability that something happens.
Okay.
It's not an answer. You haven't given me an answer why it happens. You just say it happens by chance, but why does it happen by chance? I don't have a coin, but I throw up a coin. It's heads or tails, 50% by chance, but I'm the cause. I'm the cause of that chance. So what's the cause of your chance? Chance is not a cause.
Hold on. By definition, chance means a random event. That's
random
just
event.
word jugglery.
How does the random event take place? Why does it take
Which-
place?
Well, why shouldn't it not take place? What's the problem?
Because it has to have a cause.
Why does it have to have a cause?
Because everything has a cause.
No. Everything that you have experience of
No.
has a cause, but there may be things that you have no experience of which have no cause at all. How does everything have to have a cause?
Because
What is your
everything
proof?
that you've experienced has a cause. You show me something that doesn't have a cause.
Well, for example, if we say,
Everything that is in your experience, give me one thing that doesn't have a cause.
we could say that this creation may not have a cause.
Don't say may not have a cause, tell me what doesn't have a cause. Factually, you show me something that doesn't have a cause, not what may, or something that you can't
Okay,
give.
so what's your point?
That you don't have an answer. You don't have an answer why it takes place. Therefore, if you don't
But
have
your
an
answer
answer,
is mythological.
my answer is not mythological. My answer is very scientific. I'm telling you there's a judge who makes decisions on the basis of people's activities. You weren't in the courtroom to see what all the lawyers debated and to see what this person, what the actual cause of their misdeeds were. You're only seeing the newspaper. You're opening something up and you're seeing this much. But there is some more. Now, you want to understand why there's more? Because you're saying that there is no such thing as past life. Were you a child?
Yes.
You sure?
Yes.
Okay. And now, you're not a child anymore.
Okay.
You were once a young boy,
And
and
how
you're
did-
going to be an old man, right?
Yeah, but how does this prove
Okay.
past lives? What's that got to do with past
that
lives?
means, wasn't your childhood a past life?
No, it's part of a continuum of this life.
It's part of a continuum. What continues?
The body continues. It grows into different
But the body
different
changed.
states. Yeah, the body changes.
Do you look the same as the same person? As that child?
No, the body's different.
The body's different. So what stays the same?
What's your point?
What stays the same? Answer the question. What
Okay,
stays the
so
same?
I say the same. What does that
What
have
is
to do with
what is
past
staying
lives?
the same? You said your body changes.
Okay, so
Do
let's
you
say
think the
my
same?
personality.
Do you think the same?
I think differently.
What stays the same? What's staying the same?
Okay, so
You
let's-
said personality. That's good.
okay,
That's good.
Okay,
Okay, what is the personality?
you haven't answered my question about
No,
past
I'm
lives.
the one who's asking the question.
No.
And you're not
no,
answering
no,
the
no.
question. What is the
You-
person? I'm answering the question by asking you a question. You just let me ask the question, and then you come around to it. What is personality? You're doing good. Just tell me what the personality is. What is the personality?
Okay,
Who are you?
personality is my identity.
What is your identity?
I'm a person.
What kind of person? Who are you? What does it mean to be a person? Identify the substance. What is it? You don't know.
I've never really considered that.
You don't know who you are, and you're challenging who God is. You don't even know who you
now
are.
you're playing semantics.
I'm not playing
Now you're playing
semantics.
semantics. That's a completely different
Tell me
thing.
who you are.
It's a completely different thing.
Tell me who you are. It's not a different thing.
It is a different thing.
It's not a different
Yes,
thing.
it is.
What is your profession? What is your profession? What is your
Is this an
profession?
interview for a job?
What is your profession? Tell me.
I'm a manager.
You're a manager.
Okay.
Do you understand quantum mechanics?
No,
Why not?
because I don't want to.
Okay. Well, you don't want to, and you don't have the knowledge, right?
Okay.
Okay, fine. Similarly, you don't even know who you are, so how do you have even the ability to understand who God is?
So let's look at that.
Isn't that a problem
no,
for
no,
you
you just
that you
answered.
don't know
You've
who you
asked a
are?
question. Can I answer?
Who are
said,
you?
You said you don't even know who you are.
Yeah.
How can you understand who God is?
Yeah.
Does it follow? Let's look at that logically. Does it follow that if person A does not know who they are, therefore by definition they can't know who God is? Does that logically follow? I don't think so.
Yes.
How does it
Yes.
logically follow? An
You don't
argument is
have.
an
Why do
argu-
you need to get educated?
An argument is logical if and only if, when the premises are true, the conclusion cannot be false. Your argument that if I don't know who I am, therefore I can't know who God is, that is a logically flawed argument. It does not follow.
Can I answer?
Please.
Fine. You need to have qualification for understanding who God is, just like you need to have qualification for understanding management. You didn't get into management school out of grade school. You had to go through high school and college and so on, correct?
Okay, yes.
So if you want to know who the supreme manager is, who managed this scenario with this old lady, you've got to have some qualification. And the first qualification is you've got to know who you are. And you don't know who you are. So then how can you challenge someone else? Just like you don't know quantum mechanics because you don't have the qualifications. If you got the qualifications, you'd understand quantum mechanics. So similarly, if you don't understand God and you don't understand how God works, because you don't have the qualification, why do you assume that you should know who God is and understand God is and question God's decisions when you don't know anything? If you don't know anything about law, how can you challenge the judge's decision?
Okay.
You need to know something about law. So first you have to qualify yourself. And the beginning qualification is, isn't it the very basic thing to know who you are? Doesn't it interest you?
I think I'm a pretty interesting person already.
You're interesting, but you don't know who you are.
So let's follow your line of reasoning.
Fine.
Okay, so you're talking about how in order to know God, one has to become qualified.
Yes.
Now, that strikes me as a bit strange, and I'll explain why. Because according to your religion, and according to other people's religion, God wants himself to be known, okay? Now, it seems to me that if a God wants himself to be known, and if he's all-powerful, why does he make all of these mysterious, mystical qualifications? Why wouldn't it be easier?
You're just mystical.
No, let me
They're
finish.
mystical and mysterious is because
Wouldn't
you're very
it-
insignificant
wouldn't it be
and everything's
easier?
mystical for you.
Wouldn't it be easier?
Quantum mechanics is mystical for you.
Wouldn't
It's not mystical for a nuclear
Okay.
physicist.
Wouldn't it be easier if God wants himself to be known? Wouldn't it be far easier if he just appears before people and that's the story? Why make it? Why add all these qualifications?
Why add all these qualifications?
Yeah, why these
Do
qualifications?
you just show up whenever someone calls you?
No,
Why not?
because I don't want to.
Well, maybe he doesn't want to. Because he's a person. Why should he come to upstarts like you, who have no qualification, who just want to see God immediately? Who do you think he is? You order carrier?
But that doesn't make sense
It
because
doesn't
you,
make sense to you because you don't even know who you are and you're not even
no,
interested.
no. Hold on.
Of course it doesn't make sense
hold
to
on,
you.
Hold on. No.
Someone who's not even
No.
interested who they are, of course it doesn't make sense.
No, hold on.
But
The
just
point-
because something doesn't make sense to you doesn't mean that it doesn't make
It's
sense.
still a contradiction. It's still a contradiction because your religion and other people's religion says that God wants himself to be known. Let me
He
finish.
wants himself to be known
Can I-
to the people who are
Is it-
qualified,
he
who are
wants him-
interested in knowing him.
My understanding of religions in general is that God wants himself to be known to everyone. Now,
Everyone who's qualified.
where is that?
Talk about other religions. I'm telling you about our religion. You're talking to me. I'm not representing another religion. I'm representing our religion. And our religion says you have to be qualified. That's called Bhaktya Mama Vijanati. You want to know God? Then qualify yourself. You want a degree? Why couldn't you get a degree for nothing? Why did you have to work to get a degree in management? Why couldn't they just give it to you? Isn't it fair? Isn't it obvious? Why do all these kids have to go through 20 years of hard slave labor just to get a diploma? Just so they can be dogs and work in some business. Become management consultants.
I don't buy your argument.
You have to work. You have to become qualified.
I don't buy your
So if you want to know God, you have to be qualified. You have to be a nuclear physicist. You have to go to university for 10 years, which means altogether 25 years of study, just to understand an atom. And the atom is the smallest part of God's creation. So if you understand God, you have to have some qualification. And the qualification starts with understanding who you are.
See, the thing is, your argument would have sounded convincing, but there's a problem with your argument. Your argument and all of these analogies are completely material. There's no reason why, because in order, if I have
That's
to...
because you're
Can I, hold
material.
on
And I
one
can't
second.
give you anything
Hold
spiritual.
on. Because it does not follow that because by the laws of this country or by the educational standards of this country that someone has to work 3 years or however many years for a degree, it does not therefore follow that therefore in order to know God one has to do something. It doesn't follow.
It follows.
So therefore, where are you getting this idea from that you have to be qualified? Who told you that?
God told me.
God told you directly?
Yes.
God told you directly?
Yeah. Are you going to believe me?
Okay, so let's...
Do you believe me?
I don't know you.
Then why are you asking me?
For all...
Why do you ask me if you don't believe me?
Hold on.
Don't ask me any questions
hold
unless
on.
you're going to believe
Hold
what
on.
I tell you.
No, that's not the point. The point is we're here to discuss and explore what you're telling me. I'm not like you. I'm not a blind follower.
You're a blind follower
I'm
of
not
your
a blind
belief.
follower. So therefore, when you tell me something,
You're
I'm going
very
to
blind
question.
because you don't even know who you are.
I'm going to question what you've told me. Okay, so let's look at that. So you said that God told you directly.
Yes.
Is there anything else that God told you? Did he tell you like the numbers for the lottery, for example?
None of your business.
Yeah, do you have a lot of money?
None
Do you have a lot
of your
of money?
business.
Do you have a lot of money?
I have no money.
No?
I have no
So he
money.
didn't-
I have no
so
bank
he didn't
account.
he didn't give you the details.
But we're not talking about lottery. We're talking about qualification. Everything in this world requires qualification. Whatever you want to achieve requires qualification. Similarly, because I don't know where you studied logic, but you certainly didn't study it in university.
It did. I
So
did
this-
study in university.
Well, it was a bad university.
It was a good university.
No universities are good. Anyway, this is not bad logic. Logic is that everything requires qualification in this world. And what to speak of, if anything in this world requires qualification for understanding, then how much more qualification requires to understand the creator of this world? If that creator of this world wants to reveal himself to you, he does, but he needs people to have a favorable, submissive attitude, because he's not your order supplier, he's not your slave, you're his servant. So it starts by understanding who you are. Now, it may sound like I'm pedantic coming back to the original point, but unfortunately we can't talk about mathematics unless you can add. And if you think 1 and 1 is 3, then we can't get anywhere with mathematics. So you don't know who you are. And when you don't know who you are, you don't even know what the starting point is where you're going to actually understand God. So you need qualification, and you have to concede the fact that everything requires a qualification. And what's your qualification for understanding God? It requires a certain degree of faith. Well, I'm not trying to prove God to you. I can't prove God's existence to you. So we're not here to prove that God exists. If you want proof, I'll give you an experiment where you can prove it. But empirically, I'm not going to prove God to you because there's no empiric proof for God.
Okay, so let's talk about your experiment. Okay, so you're going to give an experiment that allows someone to prove that God exists.
I'm only going to give you an experiment if you do it.
Okay, no, hold on. Let me finish.
Yeah?
So you're talking about an experiment which allows someone to prove that there is a God. Okay, that's interesting. Now, I just have a question about this experiment. This proof that comes by your experiment, is this proof that comes by your experiment a proof that is empirically verifiable in any way, shape or form, or is it simply something that exists in someone's imagination? What's your answer?
You try the experiment, you find out.
That's not what I'm asking you.
That's how experiments work.
No. I'm asking, have you done the experiment?
I've done the experiment.
Okay,
I'm
so
doing the
so
experiment.
if you can answer the question I'm asking about your experience of the experiment, is it the case that if someone does your experiment, that they get some objective proof, or is the proof simply something that exists in someone's mind? What's your answer?
It's completely objective.
It's completely objective?
Completely objective to them because they become qualified.
So, wait, how can something, so you're saying it's completely objective to them?
Completely.
But
It's
isn't the
called
defi-
pratyaksha. Pratyaksha means that it's perceivable by the senses.
Okay, but isn't the idea of something being objective that it has the same dimensions, the same characteristics that can be perceived by different people? I mean, isn't that the normal
No.
way? Isn't that the normal way in which we understand objectivity? Isn't what you're talking about, aren't you just speaking in some kind of flowery language about something that in all essence is completely
Try the
subjective?
experiment and you'll find out. What is this here? This,
It's a table.
what's it made of?
I don't
What's
know.
it made of?
Maybe it's wood?
Well, yeah, it is.
So we agree on something then.
But it's not. It's wood to you. But it's actually atoms. But you can't see the atoms.
It's
But it's
atoms,
wood.
but it's also wood.
Yes. But it's actually atoms. You can't see them. Someone else can. For instance, a nuclear physicist, he'll think in terms of wood, in terms of atoms. So you need to have the type of vision. You have one certain type of vision, and when you do the experiment, you'll have a broader vision. You'll have a different type of vision that will allow you to see God, which is completely objective, completely scientifically verifiable for those people who actually have also performed that experiment.
Oh, okay. So you're saying that only the people who do
Only
the people who do the experiment
Only.
can have the same understanding.
Only. Otherwise, you're out.
Okay. So, what if your so-called experiment is just some kind of mental kind of insanity or imbalance? Isn't it the case that you could be on very, very dangerous ground because you could...
At least I know who I am.
Let me
You
finish.
don't know who
Let me
you
finish
are.
what I'm saying, please.
So when we're talking about crazy people,
can I finish?
you don't even
Can
know
I
who you
finish
are.
what I'm saying, please?
And you're happy with
Can
that.
I finish my point, please?
Are you happy not knowing who you are?
It's a nice try to
Do you-
change the
do you
subject, but I want to stick
I'm
to
not
this
changing the
point.
subject.
I'm asking you
Go
that
ahead.
if it's the case that only the same people who follow your quote-unquote experiment can verify it, isn't there a problem with that? Because what if all of those people who are doing your quote-unquote experiment are, by doing that experiment, damaging their own mind and having the same
You went to
delusion?
bad university. This is the way any experiment works. Only the people who perform the experiment get a particular result. It isn't that other people who sit somewhere in the cafe are going to get a result. But you perform the experiment and you'll perceive the result of the experiment and you'll understand what it is that you're meant to see. The other people in the cafe won't see. But you can't see because you don't want to see. You're not even interested who you are and you don't think that it's a problem. But it is a problem. And the problem is that your vision is extremely limited. Do you think everyone sees reality the same way? Everyone has the same perception of reality? Or do you think that people see things differently, according to their level of consciousness? Do you think a dog sees this table the same way as we see the
I
table?
have absolutely no idea how the dog sees it. Do
Well,
you?
when a dog comes in here, what does he do to tables usually? Either he'll...
I don't think we want to talk about that right now.
Anyway, that's how dogs relate to tables.
That's how they
to them
relate, but I don't know how
differently.
they see it.
But they have a different consciousness.
Okay. So,
They have a different consciousness.
so you said something very interesting. You said that only the people...
People perceive reality differently according to their level of consciousness.
Okay.
So Krishna consciousness means that you elevate, you purify your consciousness till you can see God. You don't have a dog consciousness. Your consciousness is similar to a dog's because you don't know who you are. So it's a
No.
big problem.
No.
And the fact that it's not a problem for you is even a bigger problem. So until your consciousness changes and you're interested in who you are, because it's a pretty fundamental issue in life, instead of just being what you are, that you're actually interested in who you are. To know who you are, that your body's changing, your mind's changing, your intelligence is changing, and yet something very essential in you never changes. Isn't that amazing? And that doesn't interest you? Are you nuts? Don't you ever think of these things that you don't know who you are, that it's a problem?
It does amaze me, and the wonder of the universe and the wonder of creation does amaze me, and I completely appreciate it for what it is. I do not have to resort to some mythical being who...
No, we're not mythical. We're talking about you.
I
You're
do
the
not
one
have
who's
to
changing.
resort to some mythical being in order to appreciate. But I want to go back to
It's
what you
not
said about the
mythical.
experiment.
Some people think that atoms
I
are
want to
mythical.
go back to your point about the experiment. You said that only the people...
No, wait a minute.
No,
We were not going back to the experiment.
No.
We're going back to you.
No,
That you
okay.
can't perform the experiment because they won't let you in the lab.
So let's talk about
You're
the
a
experiment.
danger. You're going to mix the chemicals in a way that you're going to cause an
Let's talk-
explosion
okay,
instead
okay,
of getting the
okay,
right thing.
okay.
Why?
Okay.
Because you're not qualified.
Let's talk about your experiment. You said that only the people who performed the experiment can understand the results of the experiment. I remember being in science class. I remember sitting around a table, one person, one individual took some magnesium ribbon, they lit it up, the magnesium ribbon, it created a very bright light. I did not touch that magnesium ribbon, I did not perform the experiment, but I could see the results of the experiment. So isn't it the case that you're wrong?
That's one type
Let
of
me finish.
experiment.
Isn't it the case that you're wrong? Isn't it the case that actually this kind of idea that we all have to be involved in this experiment is really just a false argument from someone who really cannot justify this belief in a supreme being?
It's a bad university.
Isn't it the case that really this idea of believing in God is a sociological or psychological crutch for people who can't face up to the realities of the world as it is?
No, no. Rather, materialistic people are the people who are using materialism as a crutch because they can't face up to the reality that they're actually servants of God and they're liable for all of their actions. But your whole idea or your whole example of experiment is completely fallacious. I'm telling you that this water is sour. Perform the experiment and prove that it's true. How are you going to know?
Okay.
Okay? So all experiments are not something that everyone sees. Experiments are things that people individually have to perform, and there are so many experiments that people have to perform subjectively themselves.
Okay.
This is also experiment that you have to perform, and everyone who's performed it, that means many people have performed the experiment before, and they all get the same result.
Okay. So
isn't that amazing?
It's amazing.
Isn't it interesting? And you know who these people are? These people are very, very learned sages. They're very pure in their habits. By the way, do you smoke?
No.
Do you drink?
No.
Really? You're doing pretty good. How about, you've got a girlfriend?
No. Wife.
You got a wife? All right. That's pretty good. Anyway, you're living quite a clean life. Do you eat meat?
No.
Okay, you're a vegetarian as well. Anyway, you're starting to get some qualification. We're getting there. You're a good candidate. Now we just need to make a little few steps. The problem is you spent too long in university and your mind got a little twisted.
So
we should have got you on the street before you hit university.
So bear with me. I like this point that you made about how...
So these, I want to tell you who are the people who performed the experiment.
But then you stopped, you asked me some questions and I was responding.
Yeah, I asked you the question because I wanted to know what your lifestyle was. These people are sages who've been living for hundreds and thousands of years.
Some are
still sages who have been living hundreds, thousands of years. Let's not get into length of years. They're still living now. People who have a pure lifestyle, a perfect lifestyle, who personally experience and all verify the same experiment. They all get the same result by performing the same thing. Yes.
Okay, so let's look at this experiment.
And these are people who don't cheat.
Okay.
Because you must be a cheater because you're doing market analysis. So you're tricking people into buying products that are completely unnecessary. Aren't you?
Let's look at...
Aren't you?
I don't do market analysis. But let's
you're selling.
Okay.
You're selling something, whatever it is, you're cheating people because they don't need it.
Okay, so let's look at your experiment.
So you're a good guy, but you still cheat people.
Let me look at your experiment.
These people aren't cheaters.
I want to look at your experiment.
They're not cheaters, you understand?
All I'm asking, Marge, all I'm asking is to explore what you said about experiment, so bear with me. Now, let's look at this analogy. You talked about the cup, and the cup's got water in it, it may be sour. One of the things that's always confused me...
Well, a lot of things that confuse
One of the things that have always confused me about you, quote-unquote, religious types.
We're not religious types, we're Hare Krishnas.
Okay, but one of the things that's confused me is how you can possibly explain how there is this religion, that religion, this religion, that religion. One says one thing, one says another thing. You know, they're so contradictory, and they seem to have all kinds of different ideas.
I'm sorry, I'm not willing to go there.
Okay,
well, don't finish, because I'm not going to go there.
So
we're going back to God.
So you're saying that...
We're going back to God. We're not going to... Remember you said in the introduction, you told them not to get sidetracked. You're getting sidetracked.
But this is important. This is relevant.
No, it's not relevant.
It is relevant.
We just go back to one God.
It is, okay.
And you're just asking a Hare Krishna. You want to talk to a Christian, talk to him.
Okay. Let's take it from another angle.
Ask me about Krishna.
Because you're getting defensive. Let's take it from another angle. Let's take it from another angle. So, in your tradition, does it mention different religions? Let's try that.
Yes, many. Not different religions, different paths or approaches that people take towards God.
Okay, so it mentions different paths. Okay. Now, one thing that's always confused me...
But they're not contradictory.
One thing that has always confused me, and one thing that I find that many people, like me who are atheists, one thing that often confuses us is, if there's this one God...
Why are you an atheist?
Can I finish my question?
Why are you an atheist?
Can I finish my question, please?
What is the basis of being an atheist?
If there is this one God, why does he make all these different paths? Isn't that confusing to
No,
people?
it's not confusing. Why are there so many universities? Why are there so to educate people? Why doesn't everyone just take marketing management? Why do they have to be other courses in life? Anyway, there's so many schools of knowledge. ultimately it's meant to educate people, and people should ultimately understand the goal of life. Unfortunately, they don't, because universities aren't teaching people who they are, they're just teaching them what they should be, which is unfortunate, and therefore everyone's dying ignorant. But forget about the issue about why there's so many religions. Just come back to the basic criteria of requiring a certain qualification for understanding God, and the idea of understanding yourself. It does require consciousness. You're a conscious being, right?
Yeah.
Different people are conscious. When you were a child, you were also conscious.
That's correct.
So consciousness changes. And according to our consciousness, we perceive things differently. When you were 6 months old, what would you do with this table? You try and chew it. I hope you're not going to do that now. Because your consciousness is different. You know what the purpose of the table is. So according to your consciousness, your perception changes. So similarly, materialistic people have a consciousness where they only see matter as being the only thing that exists, and they don't see the cause behind matter. Although everything has a cause, and we see that there's cause and effect in the world, but they don't have actually the perception to recognize what's behind that.
And
but if you purify your consciousness, if you elevate your consciousness, just like your consciousness is much different than a child's consciousness, or as I mentioned earlier, a dog's consciousness. So if you understand the right utility of things, and ultimately you understand the cause of all things, if you purify your consciousness, then you can actually see God. But you have to perform the experiment.
Okay.
And you need to perform the experiment on yourself.
Okay. So
Because you're the one who doesn't know who you are.
Okay. So
And therefore you don't know, you need to know who you are first, before you can know who God is. Is that reasonable? Is it reasonable?
Possibly. Possibly.
Yeah, I mean, you got to start with knowing who you are.
Okay. So is it the case? Is it possible?
Are you willing to do the experiment?
Marge,
That's the question.
is it possible?
You're already a vegetarian.
Is it possible?
You're married. You're faithful to your wife?
Yes.
Okay, good. And
Is
is
it-
she here?
Yes.
And you don't gamble, you don't drink, you don't do any of these things.
Is it possible that someone has done your experiment and not received the same result that you've received? Is that possible?
Not if they've done the experiment properly.
So you're saying, let's just follow this line of reasoning. So you're saying that anyone who does your experiment properly, they all get exactly the same result. Is that the case?
It's science.
Exactly the same
Same.
result. Okay. So let's explore this further.
Why don't
So-
you ask them? In other words, there's, for instance, in India, there are millions and millions of people. Here in the UK, you can ask them. There's hundreds and thousands. They all get the same result.
But isn't it
Why
the
are they
case-
getting the same result?
Isn't it the case that some people have practiced your scientific experiment and they're not happy, for example?
Yeah.
They're not peaceful, for example.
Yeah, why
So
not?
some people are and some people are not, and they're
Why
all
not?
practicing your same experiment. Doesn't that contradict
No,
what you're
they're
saying?
not practicing the same experiment. They're doing the same experiment. The question is whether they're doing it right. Does everyone go in the laboratory and do the experiment right? Some people do, some people don't. Does
But
that mean
isn't
that
that-
the people who don't?
But isn't that a really
It's
poor
a really
answer?
scientific answer.
Isn't that a really poor answer?
Because that's the reality.
Isn't it a poor answer? Because you're assuming that anyone who doesn't get the result that you've got, they're doing it wrong. Isn't it also equally probable that anyone doing the same experiment as you is doing it and it's not working for them,
No.
even though they're pulling in just as much time, just as much effort,
No.
just as much energy
No.
as you are?
No. Because if you don't do it right, you don't get the result. You go in the lab, doesn't matter how much time you put in when you do it wrong, and how much effort, and how sincere you are, and how much you're working, but if you don't follow it to the T, exactly, you will not get the result.
Oh, okay. So
Right.
basically,
So you have
So
to do it.
basically
So
you're
people
saying-
who don't get the result, despite the fact that they're putting it, they may be making some mistake, because it's a science.
okay. So
Religion is a
okay,
science,
okay,
or at
okay.
least Krishna consciousness
Okay,
is a science.
so what you're saying is, if I were to practice your experiment, if I make even one slight mistake, if it's not done to the T, I get nothing. That's what you're saying, isn't it?
No, that means you have to correct yourself. And if you don't correct yourself, then, and you keep doing it wrong, then you won't get the result. But you have to do it, you have to correct. And when you correct, and that's why, There are guru, and that's why there's scripture, to actually show you what the right path is, and that there are certainly people who will make mistakes. But when they accept the fact that they make a mistake and they correct themselves, and some of the people that you say who may not be happy, who are not getting the results, that doesn't necessarily mean that 2 steps down the line they're not correcting themselves and getting the result and becoming very happy.
Okay.
And that they're also getting...
Okay. So let's
yes.
Okay. So let's look.
Okay, but listen, let's come down to the experiment point, because you're really running around in circles over here. Science is science. Science means you got a hypothesis, you got an experiment, and if the experiment meets the hypothesis, then this is actually proof. This is evidence. Do the experiment. So here's the experiment. My experiment is that if you want to see God, and you want to ask God all these questions personally, then you chant Hare Krishna. By transcendental sound vibration, you purify your consciousness, and you'll become qualified to see God.
The reason why I struggle to accept what you're saying, Maharaj, to be very frank, is as follows. When I consider what you're saying about the nature of God, and when I consider the millions of people, past, present, who believe in God, and when I look at what goes on in the media, I also find that God worship or God consciousness, whatever you choose to call it, has been the inspiration for a whole load of abusive and, harmful behavior.
Here we're in agreement.
And when I look at your religion in particular, because you wanted us to look at the Hare Krishna religion, so we'll grant you that, I hear about a Krishna on the battlefield, Kurukshetra. His friend Arjuna doesn't want to fight, and your God is the one inciting him to kill millions of people. Is that the God you worship?
Yeah, of course. That's the God we worship.
And you see no problem with that?
I don't see any problem with it. What do you think I'd be here if I saw a problem with that? I don't read the Bhagavad Gita. No, why would I see any problem with it?
But isn't God supposed to be peaceful, all loving, all good? Why is he inciting people to be massacred? That doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense to you. But maybe if you read all of the Mahabharata, then you get an actual picture as to why that actually takes place.
But it's still contradictory. Because if God is all-powerful, he could correct situations without causing suffering. So why does he do it?
Why don't you ask the question instead of actually saying that it's contradictory? It's not contradictory because there's such a thing as free will. And God does not interfere in man's free will.
But he could if he wanted to.
He could if he wanted to, but he doesn't because he's a person and he's the one who's in charge, not you. So you can challenge him as much as you want, but he's not going to interfere in people's free will. So ultimately, people have to make their own decisions, and they have to suffer the consequences of those decisions. And God is not going to interfere. So, and you're seeing, because you don't know who you are, therefore I was saying, yes, all of these people are massacred. And it's a fact that those people will die, and all of those people died. But what died? Their bodies died. They didn't die.
That's if you believe in the soul. If you believe in the soul.
You already explained to me that you believe in the soul.
I didn't say this. I didn't say I believe in the soul.
You said your personality.
Yeah, I said it was a personality.
That's another word, but you still haven't explained to me what your personality is.
But I didn't say I believe in the soul.
But what's the soul?
You tell me. You're the one who believes in it.
Soul is a personality. The soul is your personality. That's what doesn't change in you. That's the soul. And just like your soul doesn't change, it remains the same throughout the continuum of this body. So tatada hantara praptir, when you change body, it continues like that. You're dying all the time.
Excuse me?
You're dying all the time. Since you've been sitting here, you're dying. Body changing means death. Your body's changing. Your baby's body, your boy's body, your young man's body, old man's body. It means death. And death means another change of body. So how you facilitate that change of body, yes, it may be on a battlefield, it may be in your bed watching TV or whatever, but ultimately you have to change the body. But what is it that dies? It's the body that dies. But you continue on. The experiment is, it's already going on in this life. Can't you see it? It's ABC. Everyone understands. Even children understand this thing, that you're not this body. Otherwise, you would be changing all the time. Okay. So what doesn't change, that's the soul.
Okay, so you're talking about death. Would you say that everyone...
No, I'm talking about the soul.
But you also mentioned death. So I'm asking you, is it the case that everyone ultimately dies in this world?
that everyone dies,
Yeah.
their body dies. The
Okay.
soul lives eternally.
Okay. So,
The soul is eternal.
So-
We see that there's a continuum of eternality,
okay. But death,
non-change.
but death is an experience that we have in this world. Okay. Now, my question is, why do we have a world which is full of death? Whose fault is that?
Your fault.
Oh, so I killed everyone? Is it my fault?
Your fault.
Or is
Your
it the-
fault means it's our fault here in this world because we're here. We're willing to take on this temporary material body, which is prone to death. You want a body that dies?
I didn't choose. I didn't.
Yes,
take,
you
I
did.
I did not choose.
You didn't remember that you chose.
Okay, so then
You just say you don't
okay,
remember.
Okay, so if it's a
Right?
case,
You don't remember.
if it's a case about memory, then wouldn't it be logical, reasonable, and rational for your so-called God to give me the facility to remember, so I could understand what He's trying to teach me and do the right thing?
He does.
Why
He
is
does,
it?
but you're too
I don't.
stupid
I
to
have,
listen to
I
his
have
instructions.
No, I have no recollection of choosing this body at any particular
Do you
point
have
in
any
time.
recollection of being in your mother's womb?
No,
Were you there?
according to her, I was.
Yes. Do you believe that
But
you were
that's
there?
a poor argument.
That's not a poor
It's a
argument.
poor
That's
argument.
where you were. This is
It's
this
still,
is where you
why,
were.
No,
You
no.
don't need to have memory for things. There's a lot of things you also forget that are reality, and that happened.
But it would aid me surrendering to your God.
No, it wouldn't aid you.
If I had recollection,
aid you. You'd
if
come
I
up
had
with all kinds
recollection
of-
that I had done that,
No,
it would aid it.
You don't need recollection and it wouldn't help you because you wouldn't believe anyway. God's already creating everything. It's very obvious that everything doesn't come from nothing. It's very obvious that plants, trees, planets, universes don't come out of explosions. So it's very obvious that there has to be a designer. You can't have a more creative and a more obvious explanation that there's someone over there who created everything. You're not even willing to accept that. And neither is your university willing to accept that. So even if God did give you a memory, you'd come up with some other idea why that's not good. Why? Because you're not qualified. So you need to take your lifestyle, which is very good, one step further. Yeah, you're running out of time. 50 minutes.
Okay.
You need to take your lifestyle one step further, and you need to try the experiment. You chant Hare Krishna, and you come back to me in a year and tell me it doesn't work.
Well, since
You do it.
Since you've
Do it. Why
Since
wouldn't you
you've-
do it?
since you brought the argument to that point, while I think of a good reason to say why I wouldn't do it, we're going to turn to the audience.
Because you don't want to see the obvious.
We're
You
gonna-
don't want to know.
We're going to turn
Here's
to
the
the
world.
audience.
You don't want to know who the creator is. You want to
I-
think that some explosion created this world. Have you ever seen...
I don't want to think it. The scientific evidence
They're
suggests
nuts.
it very strongly.
They're crazy.
Do you know
There's
the
no
scientists?
evidence. I know scientists.
Do you know all the scientists throughout
I don't
history?
know all the scientists,
So how
but I
can
know
you say
what
they're
they
all
say.
crazy? You're making assumptions about me, and you're making assumptions about them.
Yes.
That's completely unfair.
Yes, no, it's not unfair. It's justified. It's the truth. Have you ever seen an explosion that creates a house?
No, but what's your point? Why would...
Then do you believe that an explosion is going to create
It's
planets,
not a question-
universes,
It's
trees,
not a question of
human
belief.
beings?
It's not a question of
It
belief.
is belief.
Just
Have you
because,
seen it?
Just because an explosion doesn't create a house doesn't mean that we could not have... The universe could not have come from a Big Bang. It does not follow.
It does not.
That does not follow.
You haven't seen an experiment. Have you performed an experiment?
An
Where
experiment-
something comes out of an explosion, something constructive. Generally, explosions destroy things. Have you seen any explosion that creates anything
No.
rather than destroys? Then this is a belief. It's not science. Then your scientists aren't scientists. They have their religion, which they call science, because it's based on belief. It's not based on fact. They haven't proven anything. Have you seen an ape turn into a human being?
No.
Then why do you believe Darwin?
Because Darwin
He hasn't proven it.
Darwin has fossil proof.
There's
he
no
shows,
fossil proof.
He shows differences in the fossil.
And there's
And
no
that actually
transition
means-
between one fossil to another. It's not proof. So Darwinian theory is already dead, and there's many paleontologists, anthropologists. They don't buy it, and they all have their own different ideas. But basically, you haven't seen one species turn into another. It's not happening. So it's a belief, and all your science is a belief.
But no. Actually, I will take.
So
I should open up for questions.
But the obvious thing, we're going back to the obvious. The obvious is that there has to be a creator. but you don't want to accept the obvious. So even if God stood right here at the end of this room, you wouldn't accept he's
I
God.
don't think that's true.
Yes,
That's a
I
speculation.
know that it's true.
If he appeared to me and he was a nice guy,
How would you know?
I would accept him.
How would you recognize him? How would you know that he's God? You'd immediately ask him, prove it that you're God. How would you know that he's God? If he stands there and he happens to be a black-skinned person who's playing a flute, are you going to accept that he's God?
I have to think about it.
You'd have to think about it because you don't have the qualification to recognize him, even if he stands right in front of you.
Okay, so let's open up for questions, and then we will come back in a second to our
Okay.
head-to-head. Any questions or comments? I think there's a microphone going around. If anyone wants to ask any questions.
It's just a question for the Swamiji. What is your? You claim that you're kind of you talked about gurus and you talked about scriptures, and you said that's your evidence for God. You talked about your scriptures, which are the Bhagavad Gita, as you mentioned. But there's this great quote. If there's unlimited amount of monkeys with an unlimited amount of typewriters, they would write the whole works of William Shakespeare. Do you agree with that?
I don't know, I'm not a monkey.
But in theory, that quote makes sense.
No, it doesn't make sense, really.
Unlimited amount of typewriters with unlimited amount of monkeys, they'll keep typing away.
Do the experiment. You can say anything. Why should I agree with it? Do the experiment. Where's the monkeys? Where's the typewriters? No, it doesn't follow. For you, it may follow. For me, it doesn't follow.
But there's unlimited monkeys. Okay, so there's unlimited people with unlimited typewriters just typing away. Surely they'll create the Bhagavad Gita.
No.
And then they'll create some sort of kind of psychological...
No, they'll not create Bhagavad Gita because Bhagavad Gita is not random chance. Bhagavad Gita is truth. And they won't. This is a dream that you're talking about. Do it. Anyone can say anything. I can say that, I throw up a glass of water and it'll come down and it'll be gold. And if enough people do it, then we'll have a mountain of gold. But it's insanity. What you're talking about is not logic. That's crazy. Just
I think it's quite
do
simple.
it.
Premise one, unlimited typewriters.
Do it.
Premise
Do
two,
it.
Unlimited,
Get your unlimited typewriters. See if you can buy them. See if you can pay for them, and or program a computer and get it to start doing the same work and see what you get. Otherwise, it's just these are ideas and concepts of madmen. And to buy into this, you've got to be crazy. And that's the problem: is you're overeducated and you become brainwashed to accept what these crazy people tell you in your places of education. And you still don't even know who you are after 25. Do you know who you are?
I'm me.
Who are you? That's a word. Me is a word. But who are you? So why isn't that we don't know who we are? We're learning so many things. Isn't it important? The most fundamental, essential thing that you start off, first of all, with knowing who you are. Otherwise, how do you know what you want to do? How do you know what life's about? How do you know where you want to go? Unless you even know who you are. That's the first thing that we should be taught. And you're never taught it. Sir, with the hand up. There was someone else behind you with a hand up.
Thank you. It seems that ultimately it comes down to a matter of belief and faith, because we can't empirically prove or disprove God.
Yeah,
So
correct.
it's just about belief or faith. Ultimately, it's just I either have faith in this religion of science or I either have faith in God. That's all it is.
Yes, but both of them require an experiment. And as I said, you've got no experiment for creation. You've got no experiments for evolution. In fact, you've got no experiments for hardly anything that work. You've got experiments for some things, and some things are very productive. But the whole package isn't actually fulfilling its remit, is that people are becoming happy. People are living shorter lives. People are going to psychiatrists. They're dissatisfied with themselves. Materialism is not fulfilling its remit.
I see several religious people who are exactly those things. They see psychiatrists, they have challenges, they're unhappy, they don't...
They may, but at least I don't know about religious people, let's talk about Krishna conscious people, but at least we know who we are and we have a purpose in life. We know where we're going. We're not just struggling to die.
I find a lot of Hare Krishnas don't know where they're going.
They're not what?
I find a lot of Hare Krishnas don't know where they're going.
that they don't know where they're
Yeah,
going,
I find them have a lack of-
then they need to be better Hare Krishnas.
But then that's the same with being a better materialist, isn't it?
Huh?
It's like just teaching someone how to be a better
No, because it's better that you're Hare Krishna even if you don't know where you're going, because if you actually get proper guidance, you will know where you're going. Whereas if you're a materialist, you're just going to be lost. There's no hope.
I'm not sure I agree.
Huh?
I'm not sure I agree.
Okay. Do you want to argue that?
Yeah, because if so that's the same as if I'm a materialist and I go and see a psychiatrist, that may mean the right guidance, and once I get proper guidance...
But your psychiatrist sees a psychiatrist also. Why?
But that's the same in Hare Krishna. Every guru has a guru, and every teacher has a teacher.
No, gurus aren't psychiatrists. At least they're trying not to be.
That's the problem.
We're sending them to the psychiatrist. No, guru's not someone who's analyzing your mind. Guru's someone who's repeating God's message and guiding you how to come close to God and how to understand yourself, what the role and the function of this human form of life is. Why are we really different than animals? Why are we actually special with our intelligence? And we're special and we're able to create so many things because we have an elevated intelligence that's meant to be used not for making life complicated, but for keeping life simple and for actually understanding who we are, who God is, and for facing that challenge, which requires a whole life. It requires education. It requires putting that experiment into practice. It requires a full-time job for which people should be intelligent enough to work as little as possible, get as unentangled as they can for material things, so that they just have the bare necessities of life, so that they have as much time as possible as they can to do this. To understand an atom, you've got to be a genius. And of course, they still don't understand what an atom is. Similarly, for the creator of the atom, it's not a small thing. And you have to. You have to become qualified because God says so. If you didn't want to, that's all right. But He's the one who's in charge, not you. So you're just here challenging. You can challenge all you want. So many other people who are challenging God's existence. But what's the result? They just died. And so what? What happened? Did the world change? Anything happen? The world get any better? Anyway, so materialism hasn't solved anything. Materialism being that ultimately matter is the cause of everything, and the other form of materialism is that sensual enjoyment or material success is what's actually going to make people happy. It doesn't make them happy.
Question in the back, I think. If you stand up.
Maharaj, I think a lot of people that I've come across, I don't think they have a problem. They don't have a resistance to wanting to understand that God exists. But I think
You're not as hard-headed as she is.
I think a lot of them struggle with the concept of God itself in order to make that leap to trying to work to understand Him. And the concept that the reason they struggle with the concept is that the idea of God means a person, but simultaneously it has to be a person from whom everything is coming. And that's where the logic in general seems to disintegrate, because if God is a person, yet everything is coming from God, how is it that there are things outside of that person, God, with which He is engaging?
Yeah.
If He is the source of everything, it sounds like a contradiction.
You're right. Yeah, it's not a contradiction. We use this term contradiction, and what we don't understand, it automatically becomes a contradiction. Like, I was born from my mother, and that sounds like a contradiction. It's only a contradiction when you don't understand biology. When you know biology, then it makes sense. So it's contradictory because we don't have qualification, or that our consciousness is not purified enough. We have to accept the fact that you're limited, intellect is limited in what it can comprehend. And there are other ways of understanding things, and consciousness is what allows your intellect to expand. It has to become enlightened. It's a good word, good English word. You become enlightened. And that takes place when these people, they have some And that's good that they have some faith and some belief, but that some belief has to put into some kind of practical action, which means that they should take prasadam, they should chant Hare Krishna, and as they chant Hare Krishna, these things that appear to be contradictory or don't make sense, and so on, they start to make sense. They start to make sense because our limited perception of the world starts to change. An ant crawling up my arm, what is he going to make? Does he see me? His conscious, he thinks I'm walking in this desert with some trees on it. And that's what he sees. That's his consciousness. That's his experiment. Am I a desert with trees on it? No, I'm a person. So that ant doesn't have the ability to understand the full scope of who he's in contact with. Similarly, we at present have really ant consciousness. But the difference between us and the ant is that our consciousness can change and the ant's consciousness can't. So our consciousness can become purified, and as these people then by association, by chanting, which is really what purifies the consciousness, it cleanses the consciousness, then all of a sudden things that didn't make sense before all of a sudden seem, yeah, of course, it makes sense. So, 3-year-old child, where did I come from? I mean, oh, the stork brought you. You don't tell him when he's 20 years old, he knows that it didn't come with a stork, but try and explain to him when he's 3 years old. He doesn't understand. Why? Because his consciousness changed. So intellect is very limited.
I think a lot of people, what they worry with is that it seems that, like scientists, there is a requirement, that there is this evasive action that religious people take, like the scientists, that whenever they come across a question that cannot be directly answered, just either they have to expand their consciousness or they have to go and study at the university. And it feels like it's the same argument, whether it's from a religious person or a scientist, and that in itself stops.
Well, it's the process of education. In other words, that's how you become educated. You can't start asking about, I don't know, some kind of complex, either scientific, mathematical thing, unless you know the building blocks. And if you ask questions about that, they're going to say, I'm sorry, I can't explain it to you. So you don't know how to add. I can't explain, I don't know, quadratic equations to you unless you know what 1 and 1 is. And even if you ask, then what can you tell a person? So education is like that. It's a matter of building and building up understanding so that people can actually then understand higher and higher truths. And science is also like that, and Krishna consciousness is also science. And we see that it isn't that everything that science does is futile, but many basic scientific premises are actually just faith. They're completely faith-based. They're not scientifically based. It's just that because we're flying in 747s or we're flying in even other airplanes and we got computers and mobile phones, that builds a lot of faith. It builds us enough faith that we're crazy enough to believe that everything came out of an explosion. So if you're crazy enough to believe that, then you can believe that God as a person has created everything, because that's a much more reasonable argument than something like that. You see people creating computers, you see people creating telephones, people creating cars, people creating houses. You don't see explosions doing that. You have to have gone insane to accept that type of argument. But because we have so much faith on the basis of something that they have done. But 50% doesn't make truth. It has to be 100% truth. And unfortunately, that other 50% is really lacking, and more than 50%. So anyway, what to speak of the philosophy of materialism, it itself is not proving to be true. People are not becoming happier.
Last question, or okay, one more question.
Isn't it true, Maharaj, that you were talking about the ant that's sort of crawling on your hand? But isn't it true that for that ant, that reality is truth? Like we all have our
Relative
own
reality.
Yeah.
But
yes.
that's not who I am.
Sure, but isn't it that we all sort of have our own truth, because whatever makes us happy is what, yeah, is what's truth
No,
to us.
but that's relative. But there's absolute reality. There's actually who I am, and I'm not what the ant sees. So you have your truth. Everyone has some certain formula in life and how they're going to approach life and what they're doing, but it doesn't really answer the absolute question of who you are, what's the purpose of life, how are you going to achieve that, and what are you here for? Why are you here in this world? You don't have any answer for it. Why are you here? Why are you born? Is it just chance? Is it just by chance that you landed here to wander around and run after mobile telephones, to slave labor in order to counsel people who are also suffering from all kinds of psychological disturbances? Is that why we're here? And to die? You're just here to die?
If something makes me happy, then
Does death make you happy? Does it make you happy to know that you're going to die?
I haven't experienced that yet.
But you're going to die. You're going to experience it, that's for sure. And you're dying right now. So do you think that that's what life is about, just to die? Does it make sense? Everything else makes sense. Everything else is so structured, organized that you see around you. And life is such a senseless thing that human beings are born to die, and that's it.
But don't we have happiness, like I do many things. And
You're
I'm
dying.
happy.
Your happiness is how you die. That's what you call happiness. You're dying. You're dying now. Are you 24? 20?
29.
29. It's probably because I knew her before she was born. That means I'm 29 years older. Anyway, you're 29. You've been dying 29 years. What are you talking about happiness? That's the ant's relative happiness. Your experience of death you call happiness. You don't know what happiness is. You're dying.
But I feel.
You're dying. Who cares what you feel? You're dying. Some person is dying. The people are dying in the hospital. They give them morphine and they feel good. Is it a good feeling?
But to them, that might be.
They're dying. Don't you understand?
They're happy.
They're happy. They're happy. They're just about to pass away. That's not what life's about, dying. And that you got some kind of morphine between now from 29 to 79. You're taking some kind of morphine and some form of drug that's giving you some happiness, but you're dying. There's more to life than just dying.
I want to just get one more. I see this gentleman had his hand up, so I'd like him to be able to ask a question.
Yeah, I'm not very good at public speaking, so I just want to direct this at you. So sometimes science can't explain everything. So, for example, do you believe in regressional therapy or past life experiences? Because there's been studies in the States back in the 1950s where they say that children can actually remember some of their past life, and they've analysed these studies and they say it's a phenomenon, but they couldn't explain why it's happened.
I'm very skeptical about these things, because to be honest with you, you can say that, I mean, first of all, you don't believe everything a little kid tells you anyway.
You don't believe everything you read in the papers either.
Yeah, exactly. That's the whole point. Yeah, and I don't either. But the point is, you're talking about little kids remembering some so-called previous life.
Yeah.
So there's so many other kids who have no recollection of a previous life. So just because you've read one or two experiments or studies here and there, for me, I would need a lot more to accept that as proof.
So there's one which is like Shakti Devi, who the great Mahatma Gandhi investigated and found out that this innocent
But
young
what
girl
he's saying is
actually-
true. In other words, just because all kids don't remember their past, but some kids do, and there's scientific, not religious people did it, scientific people verified, went to the place, the people, the names, and everything. So you're not explaining, you're not giving an answer by saying, well, it didn't happen to other people.
No, but the point, no. Hold on.
It happened to
No,
these
hold on,
people,
hold
so
on.
first you explain that it happened to them.
But there's so many other people. It's a
You're
relative.
saying
No,
what I
hold on.
just
No,
said,
no,
it didn't
no.
happen to other people.
There's a relatively small minority.
There's a small minority
And
who remember.
no, but there's also so many other people who claim to have memories, and they've been checked and it's been found to be complete hoax.
Correct.
So that does not prove that this
Correct.
happens. It may be the case.
Correct.
It may be more logical to
Correct,
assume.
but you're not
It
answering
may
why
be
these
more
people
logical
are
to
correct.
assume that it happens to a small minority, and most people it doesn't happen.
But
to.
what's
That would
happening?
that would make
But what's
sense.
happening to them? that they're remembering.
That they've
They're
got
remembering
some,
what?
That they've got some strange memories of something.
Anyway, but that's discounted by the experiment. They're remembering what? They're remembering past life. It's not what we consider to be the process of... We don't need that type of evidence. Our evidence is just Bhagavad Gita. Tata Hantara Praptiya, that's enough for us.
Why do you accept scripture? Why do you accept this Bhagavad Gita?
Because we believe Krishna more than we believe scientists.
No, but the thing is, how do you know that Krishna even wrote the Bhagavad Gita?
Krishna didn't write the Bhagavad Gita.
Okay, so then why you say we believe Krishna?
Because everyone else is coming down. How do you know? How do you know that Darwin wrote the origin
You're changing
of species?
I'm asking you,
how do you know Darwin wrote the origin of species?
How do you know that Krishna is actually what he says is actually what's in the Bhagavad Gita if you accept
How
it?
do you know that Darwin...
You're changing the you're
No, I'm
throwing
not.
the question
I'm just
back.
telling you.
You
know Darwin because you accept the people who
a
said
straightforward
that he wrote
answer.
it.
How do you know that your Bhagavad Gita is coming from God? What is your answer?
First of all, we know how it came down, in the same way that you know how Darwin, evolution of species came down, because it's handed down to us by other people. You're accepting what happened 250 years ago. 150 years ago. Anyway, whenever it happened, you're accepting that. Similarly, we also accept, because we have a line of disciplic succession, who also goes back to when Bhagavad Gita was written down. And the people who wrote it down are trustworthy people.
Okay.
Unlike the people you've been educated by.
Okay.
They're trustworthy people. And there are other people who also evidence that.
Maybe we'll end on this point because I know time's up. I know those are trustworthy people. And I'm sure you do too. But just because someone is trustworthy, that doesn't mean that they can't make mistakes. How can you be sure that
Because they don't make mistakes.
How can you be sure that your so-called line of trustworthy people didn't make a few slip-ups here and there and change a few bits here and there?
Very good
so
question.
what you've got now as Bhagavad Gita may be something which is very different to what was actually said by your quote-unquote God.
Because these people don't make mistakes. They're above making mistakes. You want to learn what it's like? You have to do the experiment. Then you can become also that you don't make mistakes. And that's the qualification, that you're above illusion. And you're above making mistakes. Otherwise, you're right. Otherwise, there could be changes. But they don't make mistakes because they're perfect representatives of God.
Okay, Şivarama, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. What was your name, by the way?
Bhuta Bhavnadas.
Really? You are a Hare Krishna. I knew there was some hope for the guy.